I would like to start this session of the International Development Select Committee. We are very pleased to have the Right Honourable Baroness Chapman, giving you my name, of Darlington, who comes with a very grand title, Minister of State for International Development, Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much for joining us. You, about a month ago, would it be now, took over as the lead of the humanitarian and development ODA spend. It's on that we want to focus the first part of our session. You're also joined by the second permanent Undersecretary, Nick Dyer. Thank you for joining us, Nick. Minister, I need to start by expressing my frustration that in a number of broadsheets today, it covered not just the fact that you were speaking at this session, but it was actually saying what you were going to be saying at this session. I find that rather disrespectful to this committee. You did ask me a number of weeks ago if you could make a statement here setting out your priorities, which again isn't normal, but I said yes to. Had I known that you were going to be leaking that in advance, or someone from your team, I probably wouldn't have been so open to the idea. All I can say, Minister, is you've given us an extra 4 hours to come up with some questions to interrogate you on. So I'm not entirely sure if it has helped you out, but it is something that we're going to be pushing you on the details of quite hard. So if I could ask for it not to happen again, and if you could refer that to your team so that it doesn't happen again, I'd be very grateful. Thank you. But all that said, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and I completely accept what you have to say, and will make sure that doesn't happen in the future.
Thank you.
With all respect to everybody on the committee. But thank you, first of all, just for inviting me to speak about how we're going to reset our approach to international development now that we do have less money. To my mind, development is how we strengthen and stabilise countries, we tackle poverty, and we make the world safer. But we need to prioritise, and we need to be more efficient, and we need to focus on impact above all else. We've got to get the best value for money, and that's for the UK taxpayer, of course, but it's also for the people that we are trying to help. And anyone who wants us to have a serious budget in the future knows that we've got to rebuild public support. Only 18% of the public think our aid and international development spend is effective. So we can't just be talking about misery all the time. We need to tell the story of what development can achieve. We've got to show the country that we have a strategy which matches their values, supports their interests, and that I hope can make the country proud of what we do. And there is a lot to be proud of, as you all know, but the world has changed, and with it, so must our approach. The days of viewing the UK government as a global charity are over, and the public here and many of our partner countries want to move on from this model. We've heard this directly from our Africa Approach consultation, and this means that we've got to change how we work. The last Labour government was central in building the development model for the last 20 years, so now it falls to us to build the future model for the next 20 years. While our commitment to helping those living through emergencies is unwavering, for countries developing, we need to be an investor and not just a donor. It's about partnership and not paternalism. We've got to draw on all the expertise that the UK has to offer, such as our world-class universities, the City of London, the Met Office, Land Registry, HMRC, education, health, tech sectors. And we need to support other countries' systems so they can educate their children, reform their own healthcare systems, grow their economies in ways that last, and ultimately exit the need for aid. So we've got an opportunity and a responsibility to modernise the way that we work. The alternative, the other way we could go about this, is just to salami slice without a strategy. I think that would be wrong. We've got to sharpen our focus with our money on areas that the UK can make the biggest difference. So I think that is humanitarian, which is where the public expects us to lead. This includes maintaining, as the Prime Minister said, our leading role in Gaza, Ukraine and Sudan. Also on health, supporting countries to combat disease and build their health systems, and thirdly on climate, tackling climate change and supporting the recovery of nature is in all our interests. But underpinning all of this work is our work to develop economies so that countries can be more resilient and support themselves. Inevitably, this means that some areas and countries there'll be less to spend, and I think there's no point being anything other than completely open about this, and I think that's likely to be on education and gender. But in those areas, we can't turn away from them. We've got to make even more of our technical expertise in the FCDO and across the UK more widely, and our diplomatic influence to lead. We also need to use our voice at the big multilateral funds to leverage more money, reform the system, and make sure that they continue to deliver. Since I was appointed, and thank you, Chair, for acknowledging that was only recently, we've had to work at speed, reviewing programmes line by line and improving coherence across government, and we can talk more about that. But really, I think, yes, you're here to question me, but also I'm here because I hope to hear and learn from you, but also from a much wider range of voices on how we get this right in the coming months. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I start by picking you up on one thing? I never saw aid as charity. Mm-hmm. It is helping and supporting nations around the world, some of them facing the most awful conflicts, extremes of weather, persecution. It is our soft power, it is our global influence. And can I also say that before the merger, but even after the merger, the spending of ODA was around the world seen as the most transparent and providing the best value for money. So I don't like any inference that we haven't always been absolutely scrupulous to make sure that the taxpayer got the best value for money, the best reach, and we help the poorest people in the world with that money. And I really hope that they are principles that will guide you in whatever you're doing going forwards.
No, I mean, absolutely. I accept that, and I would expect you to say nothing other than that. But when I'm communicating with the public and we have an absolute crisis in public support for this agenda, we have to speak very bluntly. We're not speaking to ourselves, and I need the public to know that I want them to have confidence in the money that we're spending so that we get their consent to continue with this agenda. And, you know, at times that may seem a little blunt and it may not convey all of the nuance and the successes that you outline. But I think in a way my job is to make sure, one of my jobs is to make sure that we can rebuild that confidence from the public. And I think that by saying that in the way that I have, that I hope is the first step towards doing that.
Thank you. Sammy, you were chomping at the bit.
I just don't quite know what the government's policy is anymore in relation to aid, because it used to be 0.7, then it was 0.7 if our fiscal rules are met. The OBR has said that our fiscal rules will be met by the end of this Parliament, but it's being reduced to 0.3. And from this sort of language about pivoting from being a charity to being an investor, it makes me wonder, are we really saying that we are tearing up the International Development Act and we no longer have that commitment at all?
No, I mean, thank you for that question. I suppose the first thing I would say is that 0.7, 0.5, 0.3, that's not a policy, that's a spending target. Policy is about, that's the way I'm looking at this, is about how we work, how we make sure we get absolute best value from everything that we spend, maximum impact, that we work much more in partnership with other governments, which is what they're telling us they want. I mean, one thing I would say is, having begun the process of going through things line by line, there is, and we have to cut by, it's more than 40%, looking for things to remove from our spend. There is not 40% worth of spending which you can just put a pen through without worrying about what you're doing. You know, if you, some of the reporting of our aid spend would lead you to believe that there is mountains and mountains of programming which is sort of pointless and impact-free. That is not the case. And I think that part of the job we have is to explain that better, you know, explain what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Minister, can I ask you to explain better, and I've got other colleagues that want to come in, what are the principles that are guiding you now?
So international development is about alleviating poverty globally. That is what it is about. The way that we do that, we can choose many different ways to do that. I think that the right way to do that is to focus on our humanitarian work, of course, because that is saving lives, that is feeding children. It's about health, where the UK brings something, I think, which is strong internationally. We develop vaccines, we've got a good story to tell, we've got enormous expertise and research and development capability here, which we should be making the very most of. We also have a climate leadership role, so that's why I think climate is should be a big part of what we do in the future. But I think you do all of these things, and really what you're trying to do is strengthen other countries so that they can grow, they can be more independent, they don't have the need for aid from us in the way that they have done in the past. We look at examples like South Korea, where they've transformed themselves in recent decades. They're now a global powerhouse. Who thought that would have happened sort of 40 years ago? This can work, but I think we've got to modernise how we do this. We've got to look at the multilateral architecture. We need to work with them to reshape how they're going to work. We have to now because there's less money, but everyone I'm talking to says that this is something that we could and should have been doing many years ago.
I've got Tracy, then Monica, then Brian, then Alice.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to press you a little bit. You said in some of your opening remarks when you were talking about charity and aid that this is a conversation with the public and this is evidenced. I wanted to press you a bit further on that. Can you tell me about why you think that is the public's perception and what evidence you base your using for this?
So there's the YouGov polling, and there's development. It's polling data, but it's also. I mean, if I'm being completely honest with you, it's experience as well. It's doing lots of engagement with the public over very many years, both as an elected member of Parliament, but also, since then, and having taken a strong interest in the journey of development in recent decades. It feels like a very long time ago now, since Gleneagles and the decisions that were made then. And you look at the world, how the world has changed, the posture of the United States, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Things have happened that have led people, I think, to view our role on the world stage slightly differently than they used to. And I think it's important that we understand that better. But I think, when you see stats that are 18% of people don't have confidence in the way that we're spending our aid budget, even though I think around 48% of people support work on development, then there's a problem. And it's a real problem of public confidence that any government that believes in this needs to fix.
And can I press you further on that?
Yeah,
those
sure.
Figures, you're saying 18% of what? 18% of how many people that were taking part in the survey? I
mean, this is, these are respectable polling companies. I can get you more. This not.
It'll be helpful if you could give us the
absolutely.
evidence.
Yeah. Just because if that's the evidence base for the change of direction, I think it's very important that we know that that's...
Well, not least as a number of other organisations have done surveys which will counter that.
Yeah. I've read those too, and I read the More in Common work as well. But that's not the reason for the change. The change in direction today is because we've had to cut the budget, and we've done that because the Prime Minister decided, as a reflection of the changing geopolitics, and we all understand what that means, to put more money into our defence budget. And that was a political choice that the Prime Minister made. It's one I support, and it's one that I now have to implement. So we're not doing this in response to polling data, but I think we would be making a big mistake if we imagined that the public were completely confident and satisfied with this agenda and the way it's been implemented in recent years. And the sector needs to take some responsibility for this. I can remember when I was very first elected in 2010, I used to get inundated with representations on climate goals or whatever it might be, and that just doesn't seem to happen anymore. At maybe because of 0.7, the need to communicate and to speak to the public about this, maybe that fell away And I think we need to relearn how to do that.
Minister, can I bring Monica in, and then I'll go to Noah and then go to the rest on the list.
Thank you very much. On your manifesto doesn't seem to suggest that there was a crisis in support for international aid and development. Indeed, it seems to say, with previous Labour governments, Britain gained world-leading expertise in international development. Under the Conservatives, this capacity has been downgraded, and as a result, Britain has lost influence. There is other polling, and depending on the question that you ask, suggests that the public do support international aid and development when it's within their interests, when it supports defence and security and soft power, which is also, the Foreign Secretary has also talked about. I want to talk about your language of charity. It's remarkably reminiscent of the US government's or administration's current language about charity, and the decision to cut aid was done very soon before the visit by the Prime Minister to the US about the defence budget. Would you say that the US is driving our policy on international aid? And would you also acknowledge that the £3.2 billion of cuts to ODA was counted as day-to-day spending, but that was only true of £0.6 billion of the increase in defence spending, which means under Treasury rules, £2.6 billion of money previously devoted to helping the world's poorest is now being used by the Chancellor to restore the fiscal headroom that she lost in the months following her autumn budget. What would you like to say about that?
There's a lot in there.
There's a lot in there.
Thank you.
So, are we just following the US on this?
No. I mean, it has happened. It's unfortunate in a way.
Bit of a coincidence.
It's unfortunate in a way, and I understand. I mean, when I've been on visits, I get asked this. So I think it's a completely fair question, and I'm really pleased to assure you that it isn't. Yes, there's obviously a common geopolitical context here, but we have made our choice for very, very different ideological reasons. This is about necessity and having to shift some spending to defence. We maintain our commitment to go back to 0.7 when we can. And I think what has been reassuring to countries is the approach that we're taking and the engagement and the dialogue and our continued commitment to the agenda. We are not saying we're turning away from this because we don't think it's effective, we don't think it's important, we don't think it's our responsibility and it's in our interest. It's absolutely in our interest to continue to do this work. We're going to have to do it differently, we're going to have to do it with less money, and that is a very different posture to the one that the US has taken. Their decisions are for them, and there is a consequence of some of the choices that they've made, that we are in places where we are active. But I can assure you that there's absolutely, we are not following a lead here. This is a response to a geopolitical context that we really would prefer wasn't there.
Minister Chapman, while you were speaking, I was just thinking to the girl child in Malawi who's no longer getting her education supported. She probably doesn't care whether it's driven by ideology. She just knows that her opportunity is just collapsing in front of her eyes. I have to say, we've known each other for a long time. I know how passionate a defender you are of the rights of women and girls. Why on earth are you putting on record that we are no longer supporting education and we're no longer prioritising the rights of women and girls? Why are you not saying that we will be embedding those within everything we're doing, which is where I think they should have always been?
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I had this very conversation with Harriet Harman last night about how we do that and how... So whenever I have a priority about something, and I started out in local government some time ago, and I would get told by officers, oh, that's okay, we're going to integrate that thing that you care about. We're going to mainstream it. It's going to be everyone's responsibility. That was the worst thing you could ever say to me. But we are going to have to do that with our work on gender. And if you work in development and you don't have a passion for work on gender inequalities running through you, you're in the wrong business. I think that what we need to do is work out, and I'd be grateful for views, and I want to work with Harriet on making sure we do this well, is that we do mainstream this and we do integrate it. And I've had people who work specifically in gender themes, say before all of this came about, that that's the approach they want. They don't want necessarily all the time standalone programming focused on, I mean, sometimes that's needed. And I think, you know, when we're talking about health, maternal health is really important, and that, you know, there are examples where that's needed. But I think we're going to have to find a better, smarter way of working to make sure that we don't walk away from this agenda. And I think some of it, because this is now contested in a way that it maybe hasn't been for many years, we have to be very clear by our presence at multilateral events, about the language that we use, about our championing of this agenda, that we are not turning away because we don't think this is important. We are having to recalibrate our spending, because when you're losing that much of the budget, there are choices. You know, they're tough choices. And when we say there's tough choices, that's because you're having to stop doing things you really care about.
Let me pause you there because I want to bring Noah in.
Minister, if I may, before moving on, just on this question of the tone around the idea of aid being charity and the question marks looming over education programming, for example, does a fear of moral hazard play into policy making around development aid for us now?
Oh, I don't know. What do you mean?
As in, if you are assumed to be ready to provide charity to someone, then they will continue to make use of that.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I've heard that as well. And, you know, you can point to examples where I think, you know, refugees in camps then find sometimes, because we haven't put enough work into supporting them from moving on, they find themselves there for a very long time, far, far longer than they would like to be. So, you know, there's not nothing in this. But I think our humanitarian work, which will be aid-based, we will be, you know, spending money feeding people, on educating them in precarious situations, on providing care that they need in those really difficult. And I was in Chad last week on the border with Sudan. You know, that is a situation where there's no investment vehicle that's going to do that. That's aid, and that's right that we do that. There is then this division in the way that we think between our humanitarian work and then development work. And in many countries, they even have separate ministers for those two things. And then we've invented this thing in the middle called Nexus to try and recognise the fact that you have humanitarian work and then you need to transition to development work. I find that quite a rigid way of thinking. And I think we need to work with international partners and with multilateral organisations and really trying to unpick some of that. You know, talking to the Chadian government, they are very anxious about how they support, and they're doing that country's got every challenge going, but how they support those hundreds of thousands of people who are living in really precarious situations, and how they support them to integrate into their community where that's appropriate, to contribute, to be safe. There's a huge security challenge here, and you don't do those things just by sticking to humanitarian aid. You do that by thinking longer term about moving people into towns and villages, about giving them skills, about allowing them to grow their own food. You know, there's a whole different mindset around this, and I'm finding a lot of interest and enthusiasm of having that discussion. I don't know exactly what the answer is going to be at this stage, but what you're getting at through that question, I think, does speak to this different way that we have to think about supporting people in dire circumstances, but then enabling them to get on with their lives, which is what surely everybody wants.
So on the shift from 0.7, whatever it was, to 0.3 of GNI being put towards ODA, will there be an overall impact assessment of this?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to do impact assessments on our decisions for sure, because they do affect, marginalised groups and very vulnerable people. We haven't done those yet. I can imagine what they are going to say, and I'm quite keen that we share as much of that as we can, and we're open about it. These are decisions that have consequences in the real world for some of the most vulnerable people, and there's no point me sitting here and pretending that that is not the case.
And what are the timeframes for those impact assessments to be published?
Well, we'll be doing them in the course of for 25-26 allocating. When we do our allocations 25-26, we'll do the quality impact assessments at the same time. We hope to be able to publish the allocations with the annual report that's going to come in June, July, and I would hope that we would be able to have something to share or be ready to share on the quality impact assessments around that time. But we'll just have to take stock as we're progressing them and doing them.
Minister, if I can bring you back to women and girls, but leading on from this, from the 2021 round of cuts, we ended up using committee privilege to publish the equality impact assessment.
Okay.
And it showed that the impact on women and girls specifically was 66% of those cuts, down from where it was in 2017. What concerns me is when you do that piece of work, is that going to influence where you are and aren't funding going forwards, or are you just going to publish it and go, oops, that's awful? Because with your statement around women and girls, that's great, but how are you actually going to compel every aspect of development spend to make sure that women and girls are involved in that? So is there a data that you're going to be instructing your teams to use to capture that? And is that something that you're going to publish and inform going forwards?
I think that the idea that you had to use privilege to do that,
It was ridiculous.
find that interesting. And I'd be quite keen to look at those, which I haven't done yet, to look at those from last time.
Women and girls,
Yeah.
people with disabilities, minority groups, the most difficult to reach were the ones that were hit hardest.
Yeah.
Largely, I think, because it was our bilateral aid that was supporting them.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I will make sure that I look at those, and I think that we need to learn lessons from the way that that was done. I think, we're making some very broad brush decisions at the moment. We're also making some decisions about our bilateral programming, which I wrote to you about, and we can talk about as well, obviously. But I think doing these pieces of work, takes officials time to do these pieces of work, and then to not share just seems a bit counterproductive.
Well, not only to not share, to not learn.
But exactly, they're there for a purpose, aren't they? The reason we insist on them being done is so that we're making better decisions in the future. So I think...
Bring Alice in on this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Minister, I've got so many people trying to catch my eye. I'm getting a bit cross.
Thanks. I was quite surprised to hear you say that there would be less for women and girls, because you talked about polling. The polling shows that 65% of the public across all political parties think that aid for women and girls is important. I just want to understand the process, because in my world, normally you do the equality impact assessment to inform the decisions that you're making. So how have you got to the decision already that women and girls isn't a priority, given that we know in the US a lot of the money that's been cut has been on gender equality, the Netherlands as well. So how have you looked at this holistically in terms of the impact to get to this decision?
That's a fair challenge. It's because I think we can do our work on gender in a different way that doesn't require it being with health, we're vaccinating. You can't really do that in a separate way. You can integrate it with nutrition. You can do a more holistic approach to health, but you're doing health. On gender, I think the thinking is that we can integrate and mainstream our work and make sure that when we're doing work on health, that women and girls, that runs all the way through it. I want that to be the case. What I can't do is sit here and tell you today how that happens, and that's why I want, I want to engage with yourselves and with the sector, and I want Harriet, part of her job is to actually hold me in the department to this, because it's really easy to rock up and just say, yeah, it's okay, we're going to integrate this stuff. We can't do everything that we were doing before, so we do have to make some choices early. How we then work, particularly on our bilateral programming, there will be the opportunity for those decisions to be made in slower time and to be able to take into account more of the impact assessments, but also all of the work that we can do on engaging with the sector and engaging with partner governments. So I think it's two things really. It's about wanting to make sure that we integrate for real, and it's about making sure that when we make the the decisions that flow out of what we're doing now, that we're able to ensure that we're not losing something that's precious, unconsciously.
Minister, can I push you on a specific? I chair
sure.
the APPG on SRHR, and sexual and reproductive health rights link very tightly to what you were saying about vaccines.
Yes.
So will you be looking at a model where you have a one-stop shop, basically? Is that what you're talking about?
So I was speaking with ministers from, I think it was Somalia, and they were telling me about their frustration with multilateral system. I think they were, I'm not going to mention agencies because there's no need. I can make the point without doing that. They were talking about how in their country there is a vaccination service, one side of the village, and then a few hundred metres away there's a nutrition service. And then what we're expecting women to do is to queue twice with their very young children to access both services. And what they said was, a woman will come, she will access one service, and then she's going, because we don't expect people to do that. Well, we shouldn't. We can go and get our babies weighed and vaccinated and checked and get nutritional support, breastfeeding advice, all of that in one place. Why we expect women who are living in the most difficult circumstances imaginable to have the willingness to be able to do this, it just defeats me when those agencies ought to be compelled to work together. So that it's things like that I think everybody has said, oh yes, that's been a problem for years, we're trying to solve it, now's the time.
Minister,
yes.
Realistically, the services that you're describing, they're the multilaterals that are giving those, or the big players. So are you looking at continuing your level of support to them, to continue the level of influence we have over them, or are they going to be facing cuts as well?
Well, in a world where we're losing almost half the budget, everybody gets a cut, basically. We're going to try really hard to cut some things less than others, but it's difficult to see how you spend what we're spending now on many of those things. But your point, we are major donors to these multilaterals, major donors, and we ought to be using that to have a louder voice than I think we have had.
So can I, rather than we ought to be using that, are you going to make sure?
Yes, we will. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Minister, in this world of new spending targets, specifically 0.3, I've got two questions, and I think there's a need for clarity on both of them. Can you confirm that the 0.3% on aid spending is now a floor beneath which the government will never sink and not a ceiling? So that's the first question. And the second question is, will the government set out a clear timetable for a staggered return to a higher level of spending as an implied requirement of the International Development Act, for example, increasing in the first instance 0.5 and then 0.
Excuse me.
Let's deal with the first
question.
So
the first one, it's our yes, I think is a simple answer, without wishing to preempt my good friend the Chancellor's future decisions. We've made a big commitment now. We've taken what the Prime Minister said was a hard decision for him to go from 0.5 to 0.3. We're at 0.3. We're being told now, I'm telling you as well, that our intention is to increase this over time. So if you want to describe that as a flaw, you can. But it needs to be understood in the context of the decision that we made to increase defence spending, and that is why that happened. If the geopolitics had been different, we wouldn't have had to make this choice.
We've heard this argument a lot. We
okay.
hear what you're saying, we don't necessarily agree with it. Absolutely.
I don't expect you to agree with it, and I know that there's huge concern about this decision from many people, but it was a choice. And it's a choice that's been made, and it's a choice that we now have to implement as well as we can.
Your understanding is the 0.3 is as low as we're going, and you're going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that's true.
I have no reason to think, no one's ever suggested to me that there is any intention to go lower than 0.3.
And in the spending review that's upcoming, what conversations have you had with the Treasury about protecting the departmental budget?
The FCDO departmental budget, that's part of the normal sort of spending review process. So my bit of the forest is about the ODA spend, and I'm sure my friend the Foreign Secretary will stand his ground when it comes to his wider departmental budget.
Could I just add a nuance to that? So in terms of our budget, one of the shifts that's happened since the 25-26 spending year is that we will no longer become the spender and saver of last resort. So we will be given a cash budget rather than linking it to the movements in GNI. So the cash that we've been given is in relation to the forecast that have been made at the 25-26 spending round. In terms of our budget, what's happening over the course of for the next 3 years, the FCDO has run a process where we have sought evidence papers from all government departments have come to the FCDO. We have reviewed those evidence papers, and then ministers are proposing a strategy and a set of allocations for the whole of government on ODA, which will then go to number 10 and the Chancellor for review and final decision in the SR. So there's been a shift in the process. So in effect, the FCDO is running the process and making the proposition and the proposals on allocations, but the final decision, of course, as it always will be, is with the Treasury.
Can I push you on that for clarity a little bit? So over recent years, the proportion of ODA that's been spent by what is now FCDO has been in decline. So are you going to different departments? So are you now saying that they have to basically put a pitch into you, and you then make the recommendations, you being the minister, and you then make the recommendations as to what is and isn't accepted? We asked them to send us the evidence papers and justification. They've come to us. We've reviewed those. We've had conversations across government. There are good reasons why other government departments should be spending some of the ODA, because they've got skills and capabilities that we want to use and draw on. A good example being DEFRA for nature, DESNES for mitigation. But the FCDO ministers, Foreign Secretary and Minister Baroness Chapman will be making will make a proposition to the Treasury and number 10 about what those allocations should be. Could I layer onto that, because a frustration of this committee over the years has been when other departments have spent ODA money, and sometimes they've done a brilliant job, but sometimes they haven't. And quite often we hear evidence where they're running parallel but with no seeming connection to other projects which FCDO will be have oversight of, and indeed in some cases tripping up other projects, not sharing the learning. So are you also able to make sure that the embassies and high commissions have oversight, if not running, so that doesn't happen in the future?
I'll maybe put it a bit more bluntly than Nick, but I think when I first was appointed, I was astonished to see how much money was spent by the departments, and my gut reaction was to get it all back, put it in one place and run it as a single strategy.
Makes my life simpler as
well.
Well,
that's true. And I'm all about that. Yeah. But I think, having gone through this process where I've met with the relevant ministers in all the other departments, officials have done a lot of work on sort of understanding what other departments are doing. There is a good case for keeping some of that spending happening in other. I mean, we talk about the Home Office, slightly different situation. So I think there is a good case for doing it. What you cannot defend in a 0.3 world is running parallel strategies, having duplication, having spending that, when evaluated, doesn't match up to what we would want, how the FCDO would have liked it to have been spent. So we're going to have to do a really good piece of work across Whitehall, bringing all that together, having, if it needs shared governance, or if we need to sort of change the way we work as ministers. I've had some really good conversations with Patrick Vallance about the R&D portfolio and how we can sort of use his expertise to try and bring some coherence to all of this. So it's one of those, necessity being the mother of invention, actually we're going to have to work in a much more sort of focused, disciplined way across departments, and that's easier said than done. But I think the way that this process has really surfaced some of those issues, I think we're, hold me to this, but we're in a better place than we were to do that.
Can I push you a little bit further? We have brilliant development directors and development teams around the world who are already coordinating NGOs, private sector, their own projects, multilaterals. So can I urge you to trust and empower them more and give them the oversight of these projects as well? Because, I mean, they're superb, but I have to say, over the years and with recent weeks, they've felt very, very demoralised and undervalued.
Yeah, so this could almost be a planted question because it's one of my hobby horses at the moment. So when I first came, this is sharing my journey with you, but we said to Post, the Prime Minister said to me, you've got to go through this line by line. I want you to have a firm grip on spend. So absolutely. What we did, we said to Post, continue to spend anything you're doing on humanitarian, because it seemed the responsible thing to do, and also because we didn't want to walk away from things mid-programme or that we'd legally committed to. We thought that would be reputationally damaging for the UK and harmful in other ways too. So Posts were asked to continue with those. Everything else, we asked them to submit to us reasons why they felt that a particular programme was worth us continuing to support. The idea being to create some headroom in this financial year in order to smooth out the cliff edge into next year. I have been so impressed by the way the exemptions process has been managed by our development teams. They have not inundated us with requests, hundreds and hundreds of exemption asks. Their reasons for wanting to continue things are nearly always sound. There's been really good dialogue. They have also, to their credit, organised themselves regionally, and they have put forward suggestions to me about how we make this change, new ways of working. There's a real strong desire to work more regionally, to be able to recognise common issues for a group of countries in a part of the world and to come together to work to devise solutions. They are the most creative, innovative, they're good budget managers, they manage their spend well, they care about impact. These people are values driven and very skilled. So what we need to do, we need to figure, in this sort of new way of working, we've got to get them on multi-year deals so they can plan their spend. When there's less money, having the ability to plan across years will make a big difference to what they can do. And we need to work out, in this, between the sort of guardrails, can't do anything, and complete freedom to do whatever you like, which means I won't be able to sleep at night. Somewhere on that, between those two extremes, there is a balance where they get the ability to innovate and do what's right in their place, because we have them there because they are experts in their place. Let's allow them to be experts in their place.
And are you trusting them to be involved in how this process is being shaped?
Yes, I think that's vital. And I landed in Jordan on my first visit, and the development director there got me in the car, and she
done it to me.
Gave me a good old talking to. But honestly, those conversations.
I think she keeps driving around the block until you agree with her, I've got to say.
She's very effective.
Yes.
Thank you, Hazel. But it's not just her. You find this attitude. They want to get things done.
They also want the absolute best value for the taxpayer,
Completely.
and they take that incredibly seriously.
Absolutely.
Can I just jump in?
Go on then, and then
that's not a new idea.
No, of course.
I don't understand. It's like we're saying there's a new way of thinking. We can sharpen our focus. We can change how we work. Why is that suddenly just going to start happening now? Just because we've got to do the budget? These people have always worked effectively.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, you'd have to ask previous development ministers. I don't know.
Well, I can tell you what the last one said. It will be impossible to maintain these priorities given the depth of the cut. The effect will be even far greater than presented. The last one didn't feel she could continue in her job. I think it's a bit idealistic to be presenting some of these ideas that we can just work differently without having this huge impact.
Well, there will be a huge impact, and I'm not pretending otherwise. I think I've been very clear about the fact that I understand that. I also have a lot of respect for the former development minister, and we sat down together and we talked through her views and her thoughts and her concerns, and I respect and admire the way that she handled that decision. I have a different job. I have to implement these cuts, and I think using the strength of our network and the experience and the commitment that they have, I think that's the right approach to take. As you quite rightly point out, we could have taken different approaches at various points in the past. When we went from 0.7 to 0.5, there was an opportunity to do some of this. I can't answer for why that was done the way it was. What I'm determined to do is that we don't just say to everyone, right, everyone's losing 45% of their budget, but carry on as you were. I think that would be completely wrong. The right thing to do is for us to really think hard about impact and about how we want to work. And that's, yes, there's a difficult thing to do about cutting the budget. It's really, there are choices there that have to be made, and there are consequences of those choices, none of which anyone in this room takes lightly.
Minister, let me stop you there.
There's an opportunity too.
Thank you. Alice and then Brian, and then I've got a list.
I just wanted to finish on the women and girls point again, and I recognise these are tough choices. I understand about mainstreaming, and obviously the 2014 legislation is very clear about having to give due consideration to gender equality. Yes. What about things like stopping violence against women and girls? So the What Works programme, we've got a cross-government commitment to halving women and girls. The Foreign Office has got an important role to play in that. The What Works commitment, the programme is really huge. That could potentially put 1 million women and girls at risk of sexual and physical violence. So what priority are you giving to more standalone funding like that is stopping violence, which impacts on all the other things you talked about, economic growth, health, etc.?
No, it does. You're completely right. And I think, I can't promise to protect every good programme. I just can't. Yeah. But, when we make those we haven't got to the point where we're making those sorts of decisions yet. But when we do, we will look at the impact of those choices, and we will look at the success of programmes. And there are some programmes that have been more impactful than others. So where something's really worked and delivered, then obviously that may be looked at in a slightly different way. You can't name a programme that you say is, no one's ever come to me yet and said, oh look, there's this programme that doesn't really work, we don't think it's very impactful, we think you should cut it. Everyone's coming and telling me about things that are important and successful.
I'm just trying to understand what's the criteria.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is the criteria really value for money, or is it like values? Like how?
It's values.
How are we weighing those things up?
No, it is values, because how do you assess value for money in a value-free context? You can't do that. Yeah. So it is about making sure that we are true to our values. But, our values have got us to where we are, but we can't stay where we are because we've got to make these choices. And there will be things that we no longer do that, if I was in your position, I would be challenging and saying that this is something that's really worthwhile. And I need to be held to account for those choices. But part of the way I want to work is, especially when we come to looking at which countries, is to try and come up with a way of making those choices which is as transparent as we can be. So we're open about the criteria, that we've devised the criteria in consultation with our posts and with others, so that there won't be consensus and agreement, but at least people can see that there's a coherence and a logic to how we're working.
I've got David Reid, then I've got Brian, then I've got Sam, then I've got Monica.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Minister and Permanent Secretary, for being with us today. So just to go into the sort of mechanics of how the money flows out from the FCDO and into defence. So the way in which it was pitched by the Prime Minister back in late February was that it would go down from 0.5% GNI down to 0.3% by 2027 for ODA, and then that would go to 2.3 to 2.5 for defence. So it was pitched that it would be going almost across as a hypothecated spend. Is that the way you still see it? Because we're hearing many murmurs from across Whitehall that that's not going to be hypothecated, and money might be moving across to bolster up the Chancellor's fiscal headroom. Do you still see it as hypothecated, and how do you see that breakdown over the next couple of years as we get to 2027?
I mean, can I be completely honest with you?
Please.
Select committee, I have to. all I know is it's leaving my budget. So how it gets to the MOD and how that's done, I don't know. I don't know if, Nick, you can...
Well, there is no hypothecation in the government budget. We have one budget, we have one tax revenue, we have one debt level, and then we allocate the resources out. What we know is that, and this was one of the lessons from the NAO study, that there were two challenges about the previous cuts. One was the speed and pace of the cuts, and the second was the lack of consultation. On the speed and pace of the cuts, there is a commitment that this will be a trajectory, so there will be a glide path. So it will go from 0.48 in 25-26 to 0.37, then 0.3. So we're trying to mitigate one of those challenges. And in terms of the consultation, we're in the foothills of making decisions here, and there will be a process of consultation both externally and internally in terms of what the best choices are going to be.
So from your perspective, was it incorrect for the Prime Minister to say that the money would be going from aid into defence by 2027?
I think the only answer I can give to that is no.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
I don't know where to... But there's so much that I think all of us could pick away at that, and I'm not going to right now, if that's okay, because I think you've given us so much more. So I have Brian.
Thank you. Minister, just a further clarification on the 0.3. So will UK refugee illegal immigrant costs still be taken out of the 0.3%? And if so, what proportion?
So it will be, give or take, around a third. It'll be about, I think it's about 2.8 billion at the moment. The Home Office are working to get that down, not just to help me out, but there's a strong political motive for doing that. And actually it's wrong that people are left in hotel accommodation for that amount of time, unable to get on with their lives, or be returned, or whatever it is the decision eventually is. So the processing of those decisions needs to be faster. People need to be returned when that's appropriate, and we need to work much harder to stop the number of people arriving. This isn't particularly news, but the bit where I'm interested is that means that we can free up more money to spend where it ought to be spent, I think. Nick will remind me of the exact number, but they have reduced it this year already. But I've spoken to Home Office ministers about this, and I'll continue to do that. Not that they need any additional pressure, I think they're feeling it. But we need to make sure that money is reduced as quickly as possible.
Can I just add to that? So in 2024, the in-donor refugee cost spend came down by a third compared to the previous year, and it's now running around about, it's about 21-22% of the budget in 2025-6.
But after we've reduced the budget, it'll be a bigger percentage. And this is the issue. So we've cut the budget by 40%, but because the Home Office spend isn't being cut by 40%, I hope it is, as soon as possible, everything else is we're having to take more money. We have less discretion than you would imagine.
You don't understand why some of us are pushing for people to be allowed to work.
Sam.
Look, I don't envy your position. I have no doubt that you are trying to get the best impact for the pound. But the government is making political choices, and I think it's really important that the British public are given the full evidence of that impact. So will you commit to, when we know the answer, for example, to how many girls stop going to school as a result of our aid cuts, or how many landmines we don't dig out the ground, or whatever it is, will the government publish that impact so that the British public can see the full cost of this political decision?
I'm really happy to be maximalist in our approach to this, because I think not doing that, we know pretty much what a lot of these impact assessments are going to look like. So not being open about them, I think, is a bit futile, to be honest. So I don't know how we sort of do that. Do we publish them? Do we publish summaries? Do we, the mechanics of that, I'm not sure about. But I do want to be as open and transparent as possible. I don't see any benefit in not doing so.
Thank you.
Monica.
Thank you. Just to expand on this, on the impact assessment, the One campaign suggests that the 40% cut to UK aid would result in 600,000 fewer lives saved. That's roughly the population of Glasgow. And 37 million children missing out on vaccinations for deadly diseases, more than double the amount of children in the UK. These cuts will cause deaths. Are the government cognizant of that? And will they square that with the public?
I have huge admiration for the One campaign and what they do. But I'd be interested in talking to them and understanding how they've reached those conclusions when they don't know, because we don't know exactly which programmes and which funds will have what resource in the future. So I think the broad point they're making is that this is a decision they disagree with and a decision which will cause harm to some people. And I respect that. I don't, there is going to be harm caused by this decision. Our job is to minimise that harm and to try to get to a place where we have the impact that we want and that we can increase the spending in the future because we've got absolute confidence in what we're doing, and that we can leverage in additional money. So when we're spending through something like the IDA programme, we know that for every pound we put in, we leverage in £4 extra. So things like, so to be able to make the kind of assessment they have, I think it's quite difficult to do, but they are making a point, and it's a point that I would expect them to make, and I understand why they're doing it.
And I understand when you say you want to minimise the impact of it, but you are the government.
Yes.
These cuts are a political choice.
Yes.
And we've talked also about how they are linked to the defence budget, but also in previous governments, when fiscal circumstances have been even worse than they are now, they have kept to above 0.3%, in fact 0.7%. And under Boris Johnson's government, the fiscal emergency to the cut to 0.5% was because of the pandemic. We are in a different place now, but not as challenging as those times, and yet the government has come down to 0.3%.
Yeah, I mean, how challenging our economic situation is or isn't is, the Chancellor, you will have heard Treasury Ministers talk about the £22 billion black hole that we have, and we're making, we have made a few decisions that we've had to make because we want to make sure the economy is stable. We are seeing some good signs in the economy, interest rates reducing, people's mortgage rates will be improving. This is all good, but the decision, that was made, clearly this committee doesn't agree with, but it was made because we needed to spend more in a different policy area, and that's defence. And people can have a view. But
Minister,
it's the same question, so it's the same answer.
I'm going to say the same thing that I've been saying. It is so naive to not understand that development is how you prevent conflict in the future. It is how you prevent terrorists in the future. It is how we keep people safe and prosperous. So I don't know why it was decided to link the two together. I get that it's all one budget, but the decision that was made by the Prime Minister or his team to announce that it is not doing your case any good. So I hear what you're saying, but I really don't want to hear it anymore in this committee, if that's all right. Thank you. We understand we've read it 100 times. Can I now bring David Munden?
Yeah, I just want to just clarify the narrative, because the tone of the remarks that were reported in the press this morning were actually very consistent with, well, there's lots of money being wasted and we need to cut because there's lots of frivolous projects. as you've appeared before us, you've given a much more reasoned argument, and you've set out, which is the factual position, which the budget is being cut, and therefore that will have to be dealt with. So, what is narrative? Because you in one answer to one question, you said that all the programmes that you've seen seem to be worthy and impactful, and not actually a complete waste of money. So where are you coming? Where are you coming from? Are you subscribing to that?
Who is the real Jenny Chapman?
Well, yeah.
I think.
What's your vision? What's driving you?
Because the other part of it is, and this has been the case with previous development ministers, and there's always been a lot of pressure from the public and certain sections of the media about money spent on development, and Nick is very aware of that. But in the past, development minister has actually been the advocate for the cause. So do you see that as the real Jenny Chapman?
I am a very strong advocate for development. I think it matters. I think it's in the UK's interests. I think it's not just our responsibility, which I do think it is, but I think it's how you create a stable, secure world, which makes life safer, as the Chair correctly said, for everybody. And I think what previous development ministers and all of us who care about this, it's not just a minister's job, this is everybody's job. What we haven't done, and this goes back to the point about the way that we communicate with the public, I've seen, this is slightly off the point, but I think it's sort of relevant. The Chair will correct me if I steer too far away. But I see, we still are putting out press releases which are headed by X million pounds for X project. The public has no idea I have no idea whether that pound sign is next to something that's a big number, a small number, more than last time, less than last time. Don't know what that project is. We're talking to ourselves far too often when we ought to be talking about people and stories and the good that is done and the improvements that have been made. We never celebrate our successes. Look at the thousands of lives that are saved and the way that poverty has reduced and the impact that we have had. We don't talk about that. We don't close the feedback loop with the people who are paying for this. And that's got to change. We have to start saying, when we say make the case, it's about, yes, identify where the need is, you have to do that, but also say, look at the vaccines that we developed that are saving lives all across the world. Look at the seeds that are devised in this country, which are drought resistant, that are keeping people in livelihoods in Africa. These things are happening because of things that were done by this country, and we should be really proud of that and confident about it. So that's the kind of development minister I want to be. But at the same time, you can't ignore the scepticism that's been allowed to develop among the public. And you change that, I think, by engaging with it, recognising it, and then, in the end, persuasion. But you can't just say what we do is good, trust us. That doesn't work anymore.
James.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back to the in-donor refugee spending. So you talked earlier about how the budget is falling, and therefore as a percentage of the future budget, the in-donor refugee spending will grow as a percentage, potentially 30% or more. But in an ideal world, that's a short-term cost that is coming down. Is there not a risk that in needing to find all of these savings, that we make short-term decisions, cut certain bilateral or multilateral aid in order to keep within the budget, but actually in 2 to 3 years' time that will be growing again? So I guess I'm asking, what is the risk that we make incorrect short-term choices as a result of the in-donor refugee costs growing as a percentage of the pie?
I mean, that is the question that I ask myself every day. It absolutely is a risk, and very well put. So we need to use the information that we have. We have officials who who've done this task previously. The NAO have done some helpful evaluations of how that was done, and I've read those and am mindful of the things that, that they were generally quite complimentary about the way the department did that, but there were some shortcomings that we're going to make sure we learn from. But I think once we're over this initial sort of phase, we have to be open, engaging, listening, working with people on the ground. Really importantly is working with partner governments, because the things that we want to do will be far more long-lasting if they're things that partner governments actually want to do as well and want to do with us and want to use their systems change and policy change in order to implement. So we've got to be incredibly mindful of that risk. And I cannot say that every decision will be perfect and we'll get everything right, but one of the benefits of the system that we have is that there are, opportunities like this to hold us to account and to course correct if we need to. And I'm very open to that. I don't know if you've got anything to add from your previous experience of having to do this.
We have done it before. We've had various helpful feedback from the NAO, ICAI, the committee itself, and we have looked at all of that again in the course of the last few weeks to be able to ensure that we try and do it this time in a way that makes the best job we can do in the resources that we got. I mean, that's all I can say. And we will.
I would just emphasise that with different. If a third of your pie is actually a fluctuating cost, my point is that if you're trying to just hold at 0.3% by 2027, then if a third of that is fluctuating, you're going to make decisions, and that might go the right way or it might go the wrong way. But you are going to, say, a 5-year funding package for Garvey. You're going to make a decision with some of that that's fluctuating. And what that means is we might underbake or overbake that for the long term by holding rigidly to 0.3%. And I actually think what you probably should be advocating for is a level of flexibility, given that third, which is a huge chunk of the remaining budget, is potentially going to not be permanent. And so what I don't want to see is short-term decision making, which means that we ultimately damage some of the things we've talked about, our global reputation, our footprint, etc., because we've still got that huge chunk sat in ODA.
Most damaging thing our people in our organisation tell us is lack of predictability. Yeah. That's what kills them. That we turn around and say, well, actually, we said we're going to give you X and now we're going to give you Y. And the change that has happened in this SR is actually we're going to get full predictability, because we are no longer going to be the spender and saver of last resort. We will get a cash budget. If there are more refugees coming into the UK and then donor refugee costs go up, then that cost has to be absorbed by the Home Office and the Treasury. It will not come to us because we have got a predictable budget over the next 3 years. So that volatility that we have really suffered with over the past 5 years has gone, and that actually is quite a good thing.
Do you have any assurance that, the government keeps on telling us that these figures are going to go down, of refugees in hotels being paid for by ODA? Do you have any assurance that if that happens, the money will go back to where it was meant to be spent?
Well, we are having a conversation right now in the ambit of the SR with the Treasury, who are having a conversation with the Home Office about what that trajectory is going to be over the course of the next SR. So we want to lock that in before the SR starts. So that's not settled, and that depends on the speed at which the Home Office make decisions, how much they can use dispersed accommodation, what the SR allocation is from the Treasury to the Home Office. So we're doing that work now. So we hope to see that pushed down as far as possible, that allocation. But the deal is, of course, we are not the spender and saver last resort. So if the costs go up, we don't benefit. If the costs go down, we won't benefit in the course of this SR.
Great. Whoever negotiated that deal, It's right. Could I? Yes, and then can I say to the team, we had agreed a whole list of other questions. If most of them have been dealt with, but if we could rattle through and do them as quick fires, if that's okay, because we really want to look at the international humanitarian law as well while we've got you. So, James, you've got a follow-up?
Yeah, it was just very quick. You mentioned their partner governments and the importance of working effectively with them. I think it was in March that the UK government told the EU-UK Parliamentary Partnership Assembly that we were seeking enhanced collaboration with the EU on international development and humanitarian issues. Given the summit next week, I just wanted an understanding from you about conversations that have been taking place and the extent to which you see progress being made towards achieving that goal.
Yeah, I think the world has changed and we all have to work way more closer than we have done in the past. And my visit to Chad last week was with the Norwegians. I met my EU counterparts. We all agree we need to work closer together. And what we don't want to see is everybody saying we want to prioritise health, and then other things don't get the focus that they need. So I think that's really important. It's going to be a big part of what I spend my time doing over the next few months, is to make sure that we have those really good relationships. There is, to their credit, there are very good communication and relationships at official level, which we will be relying on as well.
Thank you. Alice?
Just to go back to the impact assessment side of things, we touched on protected characteristics, but can you provide a bit more detail on how you will mitigate the impact of the cuts on those marginalised groups, particularly those with protected characteristics?
I guess that the truth is that we won't be able to in every case, but we need to be doing these decisions with our eyes open. So I don't know how we will do that until we get to the point where we've got the assessments and we know what programmes we're looking at. But I'm really happy to come back and to go into detail about that when we get to that point.
As well as the consultation with the sector, do you get input from beneficiaries of programmes? Do you ask people what the impact would be if that programme stopped? I'm trying to spend more time in country to be able to do that, but I've met with the heads of most of the sort of multilateral organisations now. I need to, the next thing I need to do is spend more time getting to know the NGO sector and to understanding how they work and what their priorities are. But I think, that has to be your starting point when you make these choices. It's, what is the impact on the ground? Who is it that's going to be affected by this choice? Doesn't mean you can avoid every decision, but you at least have to know, you need to know what the decision is that you're taking. And you can't do that just by looking at the header of a programme. You need to properly understand what's happening. The exemptions process has been quite good for that, because there's been people have come to me and said, can we keep this going? And I'm like, well, what is it? Explain. I need more information. Where's this happening? How does it work? Could you do it more cheaply? Could you work with other civil society organisations? So that's been quite a helpful process from that perspective.
Thank you. Brian?
Nick, over to you. You told us in January that the department was planning to recruit an additional 200 development staff to help rebuild its capacity. Are these plans still in place?
We have recruited, I think it's 120 of those 200 have been brought into have been recruited, and we are continuing with the recruitment of the other 80. Right,
and are you losing development staff as well, or what's happening at the moment in terms of the rest of you?
Well, it's as you're aware, probably, we are going through a process at the moment in FCDO of a voluntary exit scheme. So there are different people who are applying for that scheme. Some of them will be development staff, some will not be. But I think your underlying question, I suspect, is do we still care about our capability? And the answer to that is absolutely. I think we all agree, and I've heard the committee say in the past, and I hope you still do agree, that our people are one of our best assets. And what sets the FCDO apart is the fact that we do have professional capability and people who deeply understand the sector and can provide technical inputs and technical capability and provide advice and support and ideas. And that is something that will continue. Now, as we go through a reduction process, it is inevitable that we're going to have to look at the question of where people are placed, how many people we need, in what sectors we need them. So we're going to have to work through all of that as the decisions are made. But I think the Minister agrees that our capability and having a core capability of expertise in the organisation is absolutely essential for our future.
Thank you. On that, Minister, you mentioned it very briefly in your opening remarks. I've had a number of meetings with ambassadors from different African nations recently, and they're all pushing to make sure that aid doesn't create a dependency culture, and what they want is technical support to be economically viable in the long term. I think you mentioned about capability, and could you tell us a little bit more about what you think in practice that would look like?
Yeah, because I've had similar conversations to you, and the consultation that Lord Collins has done on the Africa approach, we've read the submissions to that, and they say the same thing too, which is that countries want to have access to our technical assistance, whether that's on how to raise more tax, how to, Met Office, doing some work in Bangladesh. Well, there's many examples where our expertise has made a real difference, and in a world where there's less money, actually the expertise that we have has a really high value that as countries are developing, they want more and more access to that. They want to learn how to train teachers, what a good curriculum can look like, what safeguarding is, all of these sorts of things that we know how to do. Nick likes to call it our centres of expertise. James Landale suggested to me that we might call it Skillshare. But we do need to work out how to almost brand it and market it and make it demand-led. So we don't just have these are the things that we think you need, but actually a country or a post could say, we really think that this country had a more organised land registry system, that would be important, that would be a helpful thing, and we know how to do that, and we should be able to organise that expertise. Some of it we might provide in-house, but some of it we might be saying to Google, we want you to go and show them, how to access satellite imagery of the Amazon so that they can identify illegal logging and intervene. So there's lots of things that a lot of it we do already, but we could do it in a much more strategic, organised way, where we get more impact. And it's another way, I think, where we have less money to spend bilaterally, we can engage with other countries in a way that's more sort of partner and partner rather than donor and recipient.
And what about the sort of lobbying up? Because I know a lot of the big multilaterals, some of these countries don't even have a seat around the table, whereas we tend to. So are you going to encourage our teams in the World Bank, for example, to advocate more? I mean, I'm just thinking small island developing states, for example, who are at the absolute sharp front of climate.
Well, I mean, again, I didn't ask you to ask that, but I didn't ask you to ask anything because that would be inappropriate. But I was at the meeting of the World Bank in Washington just a couple of weeks ago, and I was really surprised. And people who've been going to these things for years don't seem to notice. But you had Canada, and nothing against Canada, we love Canadians,
it's great
speaking on behalf of the entire Caribbean.
Yeah, but there's no one else that's doing it, Minister. So why aren't we doing it, and particularly when it comes to our overseas territories? We should be advocating for developing nations and small island developing states to be able to advocate for themselves, and they need to be able to. We need to find ways of them having their voice heard and understood. But that's just one of the ways that I think we need to use our voice and our influence with some multilateral institutions. There's going to have to be change. Everybody
that I spoke to at the spring meeting, and we got so fed up with hearing it, was, we need a reform of the international architecture. Great. How? What does that look like? Who are our like-minded partners that we can agree what that should look like so we can advocate for it and make sure it actually happens? So I think using our voice, making sure that partner countries are properly included and can drive some of this, that feels to me like the next place for us to go.
And maybe arguing for more seats around the table, or giving up our seat in some instances as well.
I wouldn't want to commit to giving up our seats anywhere at the moment, but I think we do need to find ways of making sure those voices are heard properly.
Thank you. Monica.
Just to get into advocacy, I met a minister for health minister for an African nation today, who was ever so pleased with the support that the British had given them with the almost elimination of malaria, but urged us to keep at it before it goes. There was no suggestion that they wanted reliance on the UK, but they wanted more time. And I have to push back on the speed. I know that this is planned decisions, but the speed of going from 0.5% to 0.3%, a 40% cut, is very, very sudden. On that, I want to talk. I also asked him about how this nation felt about the UK as a result of the support that we had given them, and he was full of praise, but also the trading relationship had strengthened as a result. And I wanted to look at soft power, and in fact the Foreign Secretary put it, we couldn't have put it better ourselves here, development remains a very important soft power tool, and in the absence of development I will be worried that China and others step into the gap. So is the Minister, is the Department aware that us retreating from the global stage on international development means that it will open the space for other nations, other actors that may not be within our interest, moving in?
So I'm not going to incur the Chair's ire by repeating the points about defence. You're welcome. But I don't accept this view that we're retreating from the world stage. I mean, ODA is an important part of what we do, but it's a part of what we do. And we have our strong diplomatic network, we have influence. Soft power is far, far more than ODA. You know, we could do a whole session on what soft power is and how important it is. But we have teams in country who are able to use all soft power levers that they have, and to use, it's not that there won't be any bilateral aid in the future or money to use for investment. So I think, that's what I would say on that. But we also need to look at, perhaps this is a challenge too on a multilateral system, is how what we're spending in IDA and Gavi and Global Fund, how that's recognised and how we're able to track that money and to see where UK money is making a difference in country when it's spent through IDA, and we can use that, as we've said, to leverage in additional money, and we know it's a really good use of our spend. But how we can make that known and make that more transparent. Apparently DFID used to, back in the midst of time, have a way of doing this, and we need to relook at that, because it's about, your question is about getting the credit, isn't it, and about showing that we've not turned our backs. And I think there are ways that we can do that we're not using at the moment.
Thank you.
Does the UK remain committed to the Sustainable Development Goals?
Yes. Thank you. We like short answers, Minister. Tracy.
Thank you. Just want to bring it back to multilateral and bilateral spending. I think you've touched on some of it, and you were saying that none of these budgets will be protected. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. I shouldn't have said it quite like that. The Prime Minister was clear about Gaza, Ukraine and Sudan.
Okay. So a lot of these budgets are about to be replenished in the near future, including the Global Fund, which the UK is hosting. Will the UK's contribution remain, or will that be reduced as part of the ODA cut?
I think it's probably best if I offer to come back and talk to you in more detail about that. Well, I will say that I'm very impressed with the way that Global Fund, Gavi and IDA in particular operate and the impact that they have, but we haven't concluded decision making on those yet. So really happy to come back as often as you like. But it might be that as those replenishments take place, we might want to have further conversations.
Just one further question on that. Will the £2 billion that the UK committed to the World Bank International Development Association, do you know if that will be maintained?
I refer you to the answer that I've just given.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Monica, I cut you off about...
You did. Can I ask whether tackling extreme poverty, which a previous Labour government did so much good on in post-1997, does that remain the focus of UK aid?
I think, yes, it does, because unless you do that, you can't develop a country. You can't... I mean, it does. There are different approaches that will be needed in different places, because countries, they need tailored approach. But yes, absolutely, because while you have extreme poverty, you're going to have risk of extremism, you're going to have insecurity, conflict, instability, climate crisis, all of these things. So, I'm a Labour politician, right? I believe in alleviating poverty here and anywhere that it exists. That's who I am. That's the values that we have.
I think that is the surprise of the Labour government, that actually the cut to international aid is hurting the world's very, very poorest. And within the cut, how can you be assured that tackling extreme poverty, the commitment remains of the government?
We have less money to do it with, but that remains our commitment. And you're asking me to relitigate. We differ. We take different views.
We've heard what you said. One specific. The committee was promised to see the Shafiq report. Promised it on various occasions. Is that going to happen? And is there any point in us seeing it now?
Yeah, I think there's a point. I mean, do you still want to see it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could arrange for a briefing, couldn't we, on that?
Yeah, I'm very happy to. I think the former minister committed to come and brief the committee on it. So I think.
Just give us a hard copy. It's quicker.
We'll sort it out. No, we'll make sure that you've. I don't know quite why we wouldn't give you a hard copy, but I will. Let's just work out how to do it, and we'll make sure that you get.
Is there any point in us reading it?
Yeah, I think there is, because it was the first thing I read when I was appointed. And it does, you will see a thread for, where we are from that. It's a different context, less money, of course, but some of the thinking is still relevant. So I think there is a point.
David.
Which one?
Taylor.
3 Davids in a row, Jenny.
Yeah.
Confusing. It's a bit confusing. I just wanted to ask a question about the balance between multilateral and bilateral spending and where your head is at the moment. Notwithstanding the points you made about Gaza, Sudan and Ukraine, there's an argument to say that if your focus is on extreme poverty, then the MDBs will have more impact if we plough the rest of the money straight into them. But obviously there's going to be a traditional FCDO view that the more bilateral, more countries involved in, the more influence you'll have. So where is that debate at the moment?
I'm an impact person, so that's where I think we need to be. But you can have, there are some places where a decent-sized bilateral programme is really important, because that could be for historical reasons, where we have ties to a place. It can be that there's nobody else really geared up to lead in that way. There can be political reasons, but for me, I think that development spend is about development, and it's about poverty alleviation, and it's about helping countries go on the journey that they choose. And you do that in various different ways. But some places you need an element of both. We haven't really talked about BII as well as being another. Great. Okay, sounded ominous. But there are different tools that we can use. And quite where the balance is, I think, is that gets to the heart of the challenge that we have.
Thank you. David Reid.
Thank you, Chair. So moving on to BII, so just going back to a few of your opening comments around leveraging more money from the market. So firstly, would the government continue to provide capital injections into BII? despite the cuts in ODA? And the follow-on from that then would be, would you be allowing BII or considering to allow BII to borrow from financial markets to support its investment activity?
I mean, I think BII is a good model. It's not perfect, and we need to have conversations with them about, countries and climate, and there's some things where I've got some questions for them. Although they are obviously independent, I think it's totally legitimate for the Development Minister to show up and say, tell me what you're up to and this is what I think about it.
Minister, we would go further in that this committee has always advocated that FCDO should be on their board because you are the sole shareholder. I
mean, I don't know what my thoughts are on that, but I'd be interested in learning why you...
Delivering for you, Minister, all the objectives.
Big fan of that. There must have been some thinking at the time that led to it being constructed the way that it is, and I need to understand that properly before I reach a conclusion about it. But and I don't know if this committee's done a report on it, but if it has, then I will make sure that I read that.
Highlights out for you.
Great. Okay. I'll make sure that I read that and I can benefit from it.
Just on that final point, so leveraging money from the markets, is that an ambition for BII?
In the 0.3 world, I think it's going to be difficult for us to provide any core funding to BII.
Okay.
But there are ongoing commitments. So, for instance, BII, we've got a commitment that they will operate in Ukraine, and it may well be that we want to continue with that special commitment. There are also questions around climate mobilisation. Do we want to do that through a third party or do it through BII? I think probably it would make sense to think about doing it through BII rather than a third party. In terms of borrowing from the markets, at the moment they can't. We have looked at that and discussed it with the various parties, BII and the Treasury, and that's still an outstanding question. So the answer to that at the moment is no.
Just one small follow-up on that, sorry, Chair.
Secretary, it's not that they can't, it's that the rules that we've placed around them don't allow it, whereas other countries do.
The rules on which BII operate do not allow it.
Exactly, which is a different thing.
Yeah, but it does then, if they do borrow, then because it will then add to the argument is it then adds to the government debt. So there's an issue there in terms of whether we want to be adding to the government debt.
Responsible point on that. So are BII aware of the points that you just raised, or have they been waiting for a decision to come out from the FCDO?
They're fully aware that we're going through the SR process and our decision-making process, and we've been keeping them informed.
Minister, we're always told that BII is independent, but
I was told as well.
But we've also seen them responding very promptly when previous ministers have indicated areas that they would like them to look at and seek out investment. You referenced the meeting with Jordan recently. I mean, Jordan is an anomaly. It has a very capable workforce. We could be making, BII could be making investments there. There's private businesses they could invest in, which would help the whole country. So will you be doing an oversight of where they are investing and why they are investing?
I have been briefed that they are independent, and I need to understand properly their governance restrictions as they currently stand. I don't see a problem with me saying, I don't see a problem with the Minister saying, I think there's an opportunity here, please look at it. What I'm not a massive fan of is ministers going on visits, having a great experience, coming back passionate about whatever it was they saw, and saying to the department or to BII or anybody else, we have to do something about this. I just think there's been a bit of that's gone on in the past.
That is what I'm referring to.
Yeah, I don't think that's the right way to work with the money that we're going to have in the future, and we're going to have a very clear way that we prioritise and make those choices, which isn't just about where you happen to have been. Having said all that, I have just been to Jordan, and I could not agree with you more. And I've had a long discussion with the Development Minister from Jordan yesterday morning, and it sounds like there are several opportunities, particularly in their energy and water sectors, where actually there is an opportunity there So to completely contradict myself.
Yeah, it's just you're talking about drawing on our expertise. I would say that is one of the areas of our expertise.
I would agree.
And sort of trying to look more creatively about how it's applied would be a sensible way forward. I've got Sam.
Yeah, obviously BII has a remit of where it will and won't invest, but that is set by the government, and the government could review it. And I'd encourage you to, and I will write you about this, because I met with the head of the Bank of Palestine, for example, who pointed out that Palestine is not within BII's remit, but they would like to be. So there are places where we could be doing a lot of good, but we're not currently.
Yeah, I had the same conversation, and I think, I'm happy to look at it. It's not something that I've, I don't want to use
the whole report on it, Minister.
Excellent.
It's a brilliant report.
Fantastic.
I suggest accepting all of our recommendations.
Right, absolutely. Noted.
Nice.
Thanks. Just while we're in financing, and obviously, ADRA is one thing, but there are other ways that we could maximise financing and levers that we could pull. Debt is one of them. Labour government last time did a huge amount on it. Lots of African countries paying more on debt than they are on their healthcare. Can you just tell us what this government is going to do on debt, and including what conversations with the Treasury around how we could bring more private creditors governed by UK law to the table?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I suppose the difference is that the debt is different now to what it was under the last Labour government. And so we need to think in a completely different way. A lot of it is private debt. And so that needs... it needs some careful thought. I've heard a few ideas about how we might go about that. I need to understand it and sort of work out how, as a government, we can best use our influence to be able to do this. Because, and some of it we've managed to do through credit rating support, so enable countries to improve their credit rating, so their interest rate declines, so their payments are reduced. We can look at working like that. We can work with creditors to try and organise them and try to support agreements working. I don't know the mechanics of how we do this yet, but I think it's something that we do need to look at really closely, because it is preventing countries from doing the work that they need to do. And the example of African nations spending more on debt than health is one I hear a lot.
You've done a great report on that as well, Minister.
This is fantastic. You're going to save me so much work. Thank you.
David Mundell.
Thank you. I was pleased to hear that Gavi and the Global Fund are still in play, because your impact criteria, and even when money is really, really tough, I just want to emphasise that point, because what's happening here in the UK also has to be seen in the context of US aid cuts. And I just wanted to ask you, what assessment is being made of that, because some of those cuts, have targeted particularly impactful on certain areas. I co-chair, for example, the HIV/AIDS all-party group, and there is a really serious concern that the progress globally that has been made on HIV is going to start rolling back because of these US aid cuts. So what's, in the context of the decisions you're making, what weight are you putting on what's happening with US aid?
It is another argument, I think, in favour of making sure that some of those funds don't fall over, because we may now find ourselves among the largest donors. So there is an impact. The idea that that the UK or any other country is in a position to backfill when the US makes those decisions, I think is unrealistic. But we do, and some of these decisions from the United States are still working through, and it's not quite clear exactly which decisions are going to be permanent and which ones are going to be reversed. So we need to, give that a little bit of time. But when you're talking about our multilateral commitments, we do need to look at what other countries are doing. We do need to talk to our European partners and others as well. And if there are elements or funds that are at risk, if we withdraw from, then that needs to be taken into account as part of our decision making.
Can I also ask you just about the World Health Organization, which is another not favourite of the US administration. Is the UK still committed to the World Health Organization and its activity?
So, yes, but I think that it's perfectly reasonable for us to have a conversation with the WHO about mandate and what it does and its focus, and I'm very keen to do that. To add anything, Nick?
Well, I just want to add a general point on all of this, is that there are a lot of multilateral organisations in the system who are currently facing quite significant cuts, and as the Minister said, I mean, we will look at the system and see which ones that we think really absolutely must be protected and supported, and global health is one of those. But at the same time, it's incumbent on the system to actually reform. And I think one of the things that we really want to do as well is ask the question and work with these organisations, WHO, Gavi, Global Fund, and ask the question about how they can, what does the future of that sector look like, and how they can work better to work within actually a likely smaller funding that they're going to get.
Well, I mean, I think that's a positive approach, and I'm not arguing against that. And nobody would suggest that we could backfill for the US, but I think we do have to, in your decision making, we have to understand what the impact of the lack of US funding would have in particular areas, and obviously, with my interest, I'm citing HIV.
And Minister, with my interest in SRHR. I mean, it has been devastating. I'm particularly thinking of the UNFPA, and the UK has always led on this. And I'm really glad that you're focusing on health, because I think global health is something that the UK has overlooked for a long time, and we do have a lot of opportunities. But most of those frontline services are being delivered by women. Yep. They got horribly decimated and died over COVID. They haven't really been built back again. And the SRHR is literally a lifesaver for many people. So I would urge you to try and make sure that is there in the mix. Could I just ask you, you said climate, and climate is kind of a throwaway for something that's enormous. What bit of climate are you thinking of focusing on?
So we've been having robust conversations, if I put it that way, with our friends and colleagues at DESNES about how we make sure that every penny we put into the work that they do, and our international climate funding commitments. But the Foreign Secretary has made no secret of his passion for nature as well. So that's where we've been working with DEFRA. There's obviously going to be less money, and I'm keen to understand what are the best buys on those. Is it the GCF? Is it some of the more nature? What is it that gives us the biggest impact that we can have? We have COP approaching, and I know the Brazilians are quite keen that this isn't just about who turns up with the biggest check. This is actually about how we do things differently. So, again, this is something where we're having to work across Whitehall, and we just want to make sure that we are spending this as well as we possibly can. It's about impact, and it's about getting rid of some of the duplication and some of the just improving the governance around this spending, I think, is what I want to do next.
It's also about leadership, and in the FCDO orals in the Commons today, 4 MPs, including myself and the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, raised that it's the World Ocean Conference in 4 weeks, that whilst we said that we were going to ratify the Ocean Treaty,
EBNJ,
we still haven't. Yes, the last government in 2023 said it would be ratified in time for this conference. This has an immediate impact on the SIDS, on our overseas territories, and on the global ocean system. It's that sort of leadership which doesn't require money. It does require a bit of sort of parliamentary time, but that's the sort of leadership that I think we need to be doing rather than putting cash. And for this committee, it's always been about empowering local people. Yes. So, and it's very easy to spend a lot of money on climate, but if you actually ask the local people what they need, they tend to know the answers, and it tends to be a lot cheaper.
Well, that is encouraging. But on the BBMJ, I gave evidence to committee with Emma Hardy, who's the Minister responsible at DEFRA, and the commitment is there. I can speak to the business managers and find out where we are in terms of timetabling, because my understanding is that that's what's holding it up.
Thank you very much. Even if we could make a statement of a timetable to ratify it, I think that would keep us on that world stage that we're so desperate to cling on to. Monica?
Can I ask, in relation to the US, are there conversations between departments on, well, actually, from government to government, encouraging them to keep their role as the leader in USA? But also, I met a group of congressmen and women yesterday who were very interested in the separation when DFID separated and came into FCDO. And of course, they're going through the same thing with the absorption of USAID into the State Department. And they were very keen to learn lessons. So what conversations are taking place?
Yeah, those conversations have been happening. It is quite early days still with their new administration, and they're still sort of making appointments, and things have moved a bit. While I was in Washington, I was able to meet with a group of Republican thinkers on development, which was really interesting. And there was more agreement than you may have imagined. But also, I know officials are speaking, and specifically about this issue of the FCDO, FCO-DFID merger, and how that was done and the lessons that can be learned.
Thank you. Earlier you talked about areas that remain a priority for the government as well as areas that will be cut, but you didn't mention on either of those lists the prevention of conflict. So is that still a priority for the government, and if so, in what ways?
It is a priority. I think we do need to challenge ourselves on how we do that. And it's very... One of the things I'm finding in development is there are these sort of silos of programming, and my challenge to the system and to the department is how we make sure, if we're interested in conflict prevention, which we absolutely are, what are the best things we can do? Is it about economic reform and economic development in a particular place? I find it hard to believe that investing in young people and health doesn't also give you a benefit in terms of preventing conflict. We know that conflict has the most devastating impact, particularly on women and girls, and is one of the main drivers of migration. So it's trying to understand this in a more holistic way, and making sure that much as we are prioritising particular programmes, that the work that's done at the moment that is labelled as conflict prevention, because that's how up to now you get your funding, that we learn what's good about those programmes, and we're able to make sure that the good stuff isn't lost. There's obviously the ISF, and there's a contribution that we make to that as well. So there are things that we'll have to continue doing. But it's...
I know a little bit about the impact of this because it was my life for many, many years before I was an MP. One of the most impactful things that I've seen the UK government be a big contributor to is the work that we do with civil society organisations on the ground that prevent rumours from spreading, that do peace education work and that sort of grassroots peace building. It seems to me that the way that we've outlined the UK government cuts, civil society won't be getting a slice of the pie. Am I wrong in thinking that?
Yeah, you are wrong. We haven't... what we've said so far is very broad brush, and I think you don't have to look at this work for very long to understand that civil society organisations are an incredibly powerful partner to work with. So we do need to continue to do that. How we do that, at the moment we're talking prioritisation, we then need to get into efficiency, and are we, when we're commissioning programmes, are we doing so in a way that's really getting the costs down as much as possible? And that's going to be a challenge to the system. But I think we'll be a better place to do that because we will be able to put development directors in command of money over multiple years, which will enable them to commission in a more cost-effective way and to enable them to work in a more collaborative way and to have a bit more sort of creativity, then I think we will probably be able to do, well, we'll have less money, but we need to try and get the same relationships working on the ground.
I think my worry is those types of projects are not going to be successful in a call that's based on health. That they're going to be successful in a call that's based on atrocity prevention.
Yes.
So if there isn't an atrocity prevention focus, and if there are not specific funding rounds linked to it, those things won't get funded.
Well, we will still have centrally managed programmes, we will still have a bilateral spend, and where those things, this comes to some of the control that our posts will have. So because something might be a priority for us on a national level, I don't think that follows that we say to every post in every place, we want you to focus on the same priorities that we have nationally. The reason you have people in country is so that they understand the specific needs of that place, and they will be able to say to us, look, we think actually in this place we need to do demining, we need to do more work on conflict, more work on misinformation, we want we want to work with the World Service, we want to sort of do different kinds of work. We want to get some of the social media companies in because we're concerned about what's going on here. And
they will be allowed the freedom to do that.
That's where I want to get to. How we do that in a way that enables me, as I said, to sleep at night and not worry. There needs to be an agreement about how that happens.
I think it's trusting your staff as well.
Completely.
And
yes.
I go back to your points right at the beginning. You have brilliant staff on the ground. Minister, could I ask you to shuffle your team and to put a different hat on? Because we've got some sort of quick questions. And team, I'm going to dance around so that we get the priorities covered. Minister, we've been told that you've got until 15:15. Is that right?
I'm happy to stay for as long as you like, unless
Brilliant.
there's...
Take that first answer, Minister. So, do you want to...
No, I've remembered what it is. I think I've got Rory Stewart coming in to tell me what I should be doing next.
I mean, Rory knows best as far as I'm concerned, Minister.
There you go, okay.
But he's also very tolerant and likes this committee.
Did you be back at the department at 4:30?
Right, we can definitely sort that, Minister. Did you want to shuffle your team around?